Hello and welcome to the Integrated Rehab and Performance Golf Podcast. I am Nick Curtis, running the show here at the Integrated Rehab and Performance Center. Today we are going to talk about the torso rotation test. So another important test, one of the many tests that we do, a part of the TPI movement screen for golfers. And similar to the pelvic tilt test and the pelvic rotation test, is we're looking for the ability to, first of all, achieve a certain movement in golf posture, but we also want to make sure that we can do that movement while stabilizing other segments and specifically in coordinating a very specific movement, just to make sure that that pattern exists. People tend to do better on this one than they do the pelvic rotation test, but we still find golfers with the inability to rotate at the trunk or the torso while maintaining hips square to in front of them. So pretty much we're rotating at the trunk or torso while our pelvis stays stable. And again, we can have all sorts of reasons why this might be an issue for some golfers. But if we look into this test, again, we're in golf posture, and we want it to look just like that, where our belt really isn't moving at all, and we're just rotating at the trunk, and we're keeping our head straight down, right? So this also will test a little bit of our ability to rotate and create cervical rotation, right? But here's I demonstrate it, and then we have the golfer here do it. Here he's letting his head come with him. I'll correct him in a minute here, but as we're doing it, he tends to do a pretty good job. You can just see a little bit of movement there at the pelvis. Okay, and so we want to make sure that we get zero movement of the belt. That's a good indicator here. So again, he's keeping his head down. That's perfect rep there. Okay, and he does pretty good there. And again, this is something where we'll stabilize. Say he couldn't really stabilize the pelvis at all. I'll do it for him and see if that really clears up the motion. Again, his head should be pointing straight down. Now, if we find that he is able to do the torso rotation test only when I'm stabilizing him, then we think he has a motor control or stability issue where he can't stabilize at the pelvis on his own in that golf position to get that separation of movement. But when I stabilize him, it shows that he can achieve the position. Okay, he has the mobility. It's not quite a mobility issue. It's more of a stability motor control issue. And in this example here, we're doing a decent job of rotating. Again, just trying to figure out kind of the coordination there. He's keeping his head straight down. That's good. And here we just see how he has to kick out a little bit to the side in order to get that motion there, right? So again, we want to be able to initiate the backswing appropriately, get that coil and separation at the top of the backswing, and then allow the pelvic and the pelvic rotation test to do its thing more on the downswing. So in the sports medicine realm, or even just in the performance realm, a few things that we want to look for is thoracic spine mobility. If they don't get better when we stabilize the pelvis, then we're thinking definitely thoracic spine is a big thing we need to rule out, including at the rib cage, right? So we have chiropractic techniques that we like to use. It does a really good job in this category, as well as some rehab and exercises that help open those things up. And again, myofascial restriction, where we can do some soft tissue work, as well as even some dry needling techniques as well to really open up those muscles that could be restricting us. Lastly, in terms of mobility, we might look at the cervical spine even, which plays a role here. In terms of the muscle use and our ability to create the actual contractions that create the movement, in this case, the stability movement, is we're looking at pelvic stability. So we have a lot of exercises that we can do to help train and coach and work that pelvic stability as we move around it, right? So really important. And we have lots of drills that we can do for that and exercises that we program in. And then again, just poor coordination. So it might just need some practice here. But again, we need to learn how to turn on the right muscles like the obliques to isolate that torso rotation while we learn which muscles we need to utilize and turn on and what that feels like to stabilize at the pelvis. One of these exercises that we can do here is we're looking at the 90-90 oblique stretch. Again, this is more for opening things up and stabilizing things. So we are good. Yeah, so we're getting a stretch through the lower trunk and then the thoracic spine as well. And we're even getting some opening up of the lower extremity muscles at the hip too, right? So we need to make sure that everything is happy throughout the system there. And there's a few different ways we like to train and coach this to hit and really specify a couple different areas. Now beyond this, what we can do is an A-frame stretch here. Something that would be great for especially right before a round. So something you can do right on the tee box or at the driving range. And again, thoracic spine mobility, big one that we're hitting here. Something that we might throw it into a warm-up before we start activating things and working through more intense movements. So one of these things might be the dissociation plank, right? So a little twist on your normal plank where we're actually going to start. You can see that the pelvis here stays relatively stable, actually, so it's not too much twisting, and we're going to cue and coach that, where we don't want to get too much twisting on this initial plank, right? And then what we do is we open up, so we get some thoracic spine opening, not too much rotation happening here, and then we're going to add in that rotation at the end. So it's almost like a backswing, opening up, and then the downswing where we kick that knee through. Again, we can do this both sides. Really good to build that muscular endurance in there, and then again, just training the upper body and then training the lower body, dissociating the two. Good. And then here, we're doing some chops, and again, there's lots of different ways to modify this to make sure that we're challenging the athlete still, whether we are kneeling, half kneeling, or standing, staggered or not. So lots of different ways, but here's one example where we pull that towards our chest and then we chop, and we're not getting much rotation here as we start, but eventually once we get more comfortable with this, stronger in this exercise, we start working in that rotation as he's doing there, where we're going to actually cue some rotation. And this staggered stance, kind of half kneeling position, does a really good job of locking that pelvis. So we're focusing on training that upper body, that torso, that trunk, into rotation, feeling what muscles we need to use to get that rotation, while we let our kind of biomechanics lock our pelvis out, where we don't have to worry about that. And then again, we do other things that will make sure that we're training that in a golf position, to make sure that we actually can, with our own brain, get our pelvis to stabilize and stay sturdy on a moving upper trunk. So really important exercise there. And then another one here that I'm demonstrating is where we can, it is a banded opening drill, right? So we get into kind of a golf position, and then what we're going to do is we use the one arm to open up like we're almost in a backswing, and we see we get a little rotation through here. We can either let that happen, or we can cue it so that we don't, and just depending on what we want to focus on in that drill. Okay, so a little bit more stable on that one, right? So you can do either or, where we're going to train that pelvic stability while we're using our muscles to actually rotate at the trunk and everything above it, right? So it's something we need to train the brain to do. And that's what we do in our programming. And then from here, we can actually simulate that follow through, where we're going to get the hips much more involved. Again, just depends on what the TPI findings are for you and what we decide to program to help fix those things. Right? And then here, just a lower example to see what the actual setup looks like. We can do this with bands, many different types of bands, or even a cable machine. And that's kind of a brief extent or lineup of drills and exercises, addressing mobility concerns all the way to addressing stability and motor control concerns. Just a few exercises to do to help address a torso rotation test that might have shown some issues either with mobility, coordination, or stability. So thank you for tuning in. Hope that was helpful. We'll continue to go through the TPI screen, as well as pick up some other golf specific things here as we move along. So thanks for listening.